Someone interesting, they did ask me what my favourite sort of childhood memory was about playing sport.
The cameras catch it before anyone can explain it. Buckingham Palace releases a short statement on the 5th of February, 2024, and the country goes quiet. King Charles III has cancer. The exact type is never named. The palace only confirms it was found during a routine procedure, and that the king is stepping back from public duties while he receives treatment. Outside the palace gates, tourists stop mid-photo to check their phones. This is not a rumor leaking out of a corridor. It is an official statement, read in full, confirmed by the king's own household, inside the palace machine. Something shifts that day. Camilla, queen consort turned queen, steps forward to carry more of the public load, taking on engagements once expected to be shared more evenly. William, Prince of Wales, watches his father's public role shrink in real time, and starts to understand that his own turn is closer than anyone planned for. Then, 6 weeks later, a second blow lands. Kate, Princess of Wales, releases her own video message. She has been recovering from major surgery. She is now undergoing treatment after tests find cancer in her body too. William steps back from nearly all his public work. For months, he is a husband and a father first, and a working royal second. School runs replace state visits. The palace calendar, usually packed months ahead, sits half empty next to his name. Two of the most senior royals in Britain pulled out of public life within the same season. The institution that survived a world war, a fire at Windsor Castle, and the death of Diana herself, suddenly looks thinner than it has in years. While all this happens, one royal keeps working without a single public complaint. Anne, the Princess Royal, keeps showing up. Regiments, hospitals, charities, overseas visits. Year after year, the people who track official royal engagements for a living have placed her at or near the very top of the list, some years crossing the 300 mark. No headline moment. No breakdown video. Just attendance, one event at a time. Hi viewers, quick question before we go further. If you had to trust one royal to hold the family together on the hardest days, William or Anne, drop a W or an A in the comments right now. Here is what almost nobody is saying out loud. While Charles fights an illness the palace will not fully describe, while Kate recovers out of public view, and while William quietly rearranges his entire year around his family, the two royals doing the most visible work of holding the institution steady are not the king and not the new queen. They are the heir shaped by his mother's instincts and the sister shaped by her mother's discipline. That is the story underneath the story. Diana, Princess of Wales, has been gone for close to 3 decades, and yet every time William speaks about grief, about mental health, about people sleeping on the street, royal commentators have noted the same thing. He sounds like her. Not in words, in instinct. He reaches for the person in the room, not the position. Anne learned a different lesson from a different mother. Queen Elizabeth II did not build 60 years on the throne by being loved the loudest. She built it by being useful the longest. Anne absorbed that lesson so completely that, for decades, she has been the royal family's quiet workhorse, the one who shows up when the cameras are smaller and the story is less exciting. Now picture both of those lessons standing in the same room. William, carrying Diana's instinct for people, Anne, carrying Elizabeth's instinct for duty. Together, whether either of them intends it or not, they represent a version of the monarchy that runs on connection and function rather than ceremony alone, and Camilla stands in the middle of it. Accepted by many now, respected by some, still in the public memory tied to the most painful chapter the modern monarchy has ever lived through. None of this means Anne and William are working against Camilla. There's no leaked memo, no secret alliance, no palace war room. What there is, according to royal watchers who study these patterns for a living, is a slow shift in where the emotional center of the family sits. And once the public starts feeling that shift, it does not need permission to talk about it. So here is the real question, the one this story is actually built around. It is not whether Anne and William disagree with Camilla. It is whether the monarchy, quietly and without ever announcing it, has already started moving into a new emotional era. And if that is true, the next question is even harder to sit with. What happens to the people left standing in the era it is leaving behind? A man in a sleeping bag looks up as Prince William crouches down next to him, not a camera crew's polite distance away, but close enough to shake his hand. This is not a one-time photo opportunity. It is the visible edge of a program William built and named himself Homewards, launched in June of 2023, a 5-year push across 6 locations in the United Kingdom built on one specific claim: homelessness can end, not just be managed, ended. That claim is bold for a royal to make. Kings and princes are trained to open buildings, not challenge policy. But William did not stand behind a podium and read a statement. He sat on curbs. He asked names. He asked what happened. Not what people needed. Some observers point out that this is a risk in itself. A prince who ties his public image to solving a hard social problem also ties his image to failure if that problem does not go away. William took that risk anyway, and kept showing up to the same shelters more than once, which royal watchers say matters more to the public than any single visit ever could. Royal commentators have pointed to a pattern in how William works that goes back decades before Homewards existed. He speaks about mental health in ways his grandmother's generation of royals never would have. He talks about grief in public, referencing his own loss of Diana, Princess of Wales, when he was 15 years old. Where other royals kept emotion behind closed doors, William brings it into the interview chair. From a public relations standpoint, this is not an accident. Diana built her entire public identity on physical closeness. She held the hands of AIDS patients when much of the public still feared the disease could spread through touch. She walked through an active minefield in Angola in 1997 to draw attention to landmine victims months before her death. She did not manage sympathy from a distance. She stood inside it. William was 13 and 15 when he watched that unfold. Royal biographers have long debated whether his current approach is a deliberate continuation of her method, or simply the only version of royal life he ever learned to trust. Either way, the resemblance is not subtle in tone, even if nobody in the palace will use the word legacy out loud. But here is the limit of what popularity alone can do. William can win headlines. William can win affection. What he cannot do by himself is convince the institution's most traditional supporters that this softer, more emotional monarchy will actually survive contact with real duty, real ceremony, and real crisis. For that, William needs someone the old guard already trusts completely. He needs a royal with zero scandal, zero controversy, and a work record nobody can question. He needs his aunt. A woman in her 70s steps out of a car in the rain, no umbrella held for her, no assistant hovering with a coat. She walks straight into the building, shakes hands, and gets to work. This is Anne, the Princess Royal, on what looks like any other Tuesday. There is no headline waiting for her. There rarely is. That has always been the point. For years, independent trackers who log every official royal engagement have put Anne at or near the very top of the list, ahead of far more famous names, some years crossing well past 300 appearances. She does it without a television interview explaining why, without a social media account defending her choices, and without a single scandal attached to her name in decades of public life. She has represented the late Queen and now the King at state funerals, military inspections, and overseas visits most people never hear about because nothing goes wrong. In a family often defined by its controversies, Anne has spent decades being defined by their complete absence. That record did not happen by accident. Anne grew up watching her mother, Queen Elizabeth II, run the monarchy for over 70 years on a simple operating principle. The crown survives by being useful, not by being adored. Adoration rises and falls with headlines. Usefulness does not need headlines at all. Anne absorbed that lesson so completely that royal commentators frequently describe her as the family member closest in temperament to the late Queen. Where William represents warmth, connection, and visible emotion, Anne represents discipline, consistency, and duty performed whether anyone is watching or not. Put those two approaches side by side and something becomes clear. William gives the monarchy its heart. Anne gives it its spine. Neither one can carry the institution alone, but together, according to observers who study royal patterns for a living, they represent a version of the family that survives on something more durable than image alone. And that is exactly why it matters when the two of them appear together. Not because of any statement, not because of any planned message, but because when the heir who feels like his mother stands beside the aunt who works like her own mother, the public does not see two individuals. It sees a signal. Royal watchers have started asking a pointed question in recent commentary. If the family's most trusted traditionalist and its most emotionally connected future king increasingly appear aligned in public, What does that alignment suggest about where real influence inside the institution is actually shifting? Nobody at the palace will answer that question directly. They rarely do. But somebody else is watching that alignment far more closely than the public realizes. A crowd outside Westminster Abbey falls quiet as Camilla, Queen,
to be her son, and that I got to know her for the 15 years that I did. She said,
walks past in the coronation procession of May 2023. Some in that crowd clap. Some stay silent. Some hold up phones instead of hands. Decades earlier, a crowd like this one would have booed her. Today, most of them simply watch, which for Camilla may be the biggest victory available. Camilla's public journey has covered more ground than almost any royal in modern history. In the 1990s, she was blamed publicly and loudly for the breakdown of Charles and Diana's marriage. Polling at the time showed her as one of the least popular figures connected to the royal family. For years, palace strategists reportedly worked in careful, incremental steps to introduce her to the public, avoiding joint appearances that might provoke backlash. That strategy worked. By the time she married Charles in 2005, public tolerance had grown. By the time she was crowned queen in 2023, tolerance had shifted again, this time closer to acceptance. Her patronages, including support for domestic abuse survivors and osteoporosis research tied to her own mother's illness, gave her a public identity built on substance rather than spectacle. Camilla did the one thing few public figures manage after that kind of start. She showed up year after year at events with far less glamour than a coronation, at literacy charities and hospices and small regional visits. Nobody was filming for a headline. Slowly, the version of her printed in newspapers in the 1990s stopped matching the version standing in front of people in the 2010s and 2020s. But acceptance is not the same as being loved without condition, and Camilla's position carries a weight most royals never have to hold. Every comparison to Diana arrives unasked. Every documentary, every anniversary of Diana's death, every retrospective photo gallery resurfaces the same period Camilla has spent 30 years trying to move beyond. From a public relations standpoint, this creates a problem no strategist can fully solve. You cannot out-campaign a memory. Diana's public image was frozen at the height of public sympathy, in the most tragic circumstances possible, and grief does not compete fairly with anyone still alive and imperfect. Royal commentators have suggested that Camilla's greatest challenge was never William, and was never Anne either. It was always the impossibility of building a legacy in a house where someone else's memory still occupies the largest room. Because the hardest thing to survive in public life is rarely direct criticism. Sometimes the hardest thing to survive is simply being compared. Strip away every name for a moment. Forget William. Forget Anne. Forget Camilla. Look only at the shape of what has been happening, and the entire story flips. This was never a fight between three people. It was never Anne and William quietly working against Camilla. That version makes for an easy headline, but it does not match a single confirmed fact from the last 2 decades. What actually happened is bigger, slower, and far harder to put on a thumbnail. This is a fight between 2 versions of the same institution. The first version is the one King Charles has reportedly worked toward for years, long before he took the throne. A smaller, leaner monarchy, with fewer full-time working royals drawing public funds and public attention, focused on a tighter circle of family members. Since his accession in 2022, the working royal count has shrunk, and appearances such as the Buckingham Palace balcony have been narrowed to close family only, a change widely reported at the time. The second version is the one William appears to be building for his own eventual reign, whether he has said so publicly or not. Royal biographers have suggested that his approach favors visible emotional connection, direct engagement with hard social issues, and a communication style closer to Diana's than to his father's more formal, institution-first instincts. Anne fits into neither version by ambition. She fits into both by function. Her decades of quiet, controversy-free duty make her useful to Charles's slimmer, more disciplined monarchy, and just as useful to William's more emotionally driven one. She is not choosing a side. She is proof that duty itself never goes out of style, no matter which version of the family ends up on top. Once you see the story this way, Camilla's position changes too. She is not losing a fight to Anne or William specifically. She is standing at the exact point where an older model of monarchy, built on formality, discretion, and slow-earned respect, meets a newer model built on visibility, empathy, and constant public performance of feeling. Neither model is wrong. Royal historians will tell you the monarchy has reinvented itself this way for centuries, generation after generation, always insisting nothing has changed while everything quietly does. Queen Victoria's court looked nothing like Queen Elizabeth II's. Elizabeth's court looked nothing like the leaner one Charles now runs. Each generation swears the core of the institution stayed the same. Each generation is only half right. But reinvention has a cost, and it rarely lands evenly on every member of the family living through it. And just as this shift was becoming visible to royal watchers, another set of pressures started closing in from a completely different direction, one with far less room for careful hedged language and far more history of real, documented consequences.
Very eloquently and visually sold both themselves and their topics so accurately, and I hope I don't need to encourage you to support further.
The lights are too bright, and there is nowhere to look away. Inside Buckingham Palace, in November of 2019, Prince Andrew, Duke of York, sits down across from journalist Emily Maitlis for what he believes will be a chance to clear his name. Instead, his answers about his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein become the most watched royal interview in a generation, and within 4 days, Buckingham Palace announces he is stepping back from public duties. That was only the beginning. In January of 2022, the palace goes further. Andrew is stripped of his military titles and royal patronages. He is told he can no longer use the style His Royal Highness in any official capacity. Around the same time, a civil case filed against him by Virginia Giuffre, brought under a New York state law called the Child Victims Act, which temporarily lifted the usual time limit on filing abuse claims, ends in an out-of-court settlement. Neither side ever confirms the exact figure, though British newspapers have widely reported an estimate running into the tens of millions of pounds. 2 years earlier, a different kind of departure shakes the family. In January of 2020, Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, announced they are stepping back as senior royals and relocating to North America. What follows is a string of commercial deals reported by entertainment trade outlets, including a Netflix agreement said to be worth around $100 million, and a Spotify partnership reported near $20 million, which the couple ends in 2024. Financial scrutiny of the family is not new either. Leaked records known as the Paradise Papers, published in 2017, revealed that a private estate managing money for the monarch had placed part of its funds in offshore structures based in the Cayman Islands and Bermuda. The palace said at the time nothing improper had occurred, and no wrongdoing was ever pinned on the late queen personally. 2 brothers scattered across an ocean, 1 uncle stripped of his titles, a century-old institution suddenly explaining itself in headlines instead of controlling them. None of these 3 stories share a single cause, and royal commentators are careful to say they are not connected by any hidden plan. But taken together, they mark the most sustained run of reputational pressure the modern monarchy has faced since the years following Diana's death. And public opinion, not any courtroom, is where the family's toughest test is still being decided. A judge in London's Court of Appeal reads a ruling out loud in December of 2021, and a major British newspaper group loses. Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, had sued Associated Newspapers over the publication of a private letter she wrote to her father. The court rules in her favor on both privacy and copyright grounds. It is one of the few times a royal story has ever been tested directly in a courtroom rather than settled in headlines. That ruling matters here because it shows something most royal stories never have to prove: evidence. Most claims about the family never reach a judge. They circulate, get denied by the palace in a short statement, and either fade or harden into accepted belief depending on how often they get repeated. A courtroom demands proof. A comment section does not, and that difference explains almost everything about how royal narratives actually spread. Royal biographers have long debated why so many of these stories spread so easily. Part of the answer is structural. The palace's standard response to almost any claim is a version of the same line. It does not comment on speculation. That silence, intended to protect the institution, often gets read by the public as confirmation instead of neutrality. According to reports circulating in the British press over the years, tabloid narratives about rifts, feuds, and secret rivalries inside the family have often outpaced what could actually be confirmed, only for quieter corrections or retractions to follow with far less attention than the original claim. This chapter exists to be honest about that pattern before going further. Not every theory about Anne, William, Camilla, or Diana's lasting shadow is being presented here as confirmed fact, and it should not be treated that way. But even an unconfirmed theory tells you something real. It tells you what the public already believes the monarchy has become, and sometimes that belief matters more than the palace would like to admit. Two grown men stand shoulder to shoulder in a garden at Kensington Palace on the 1st of July 2021. William, Prince of Wales, and Harry, Duke of Sussex, pull back a covering to reveal a bronze statue of their mother, Diana, Princess of Wales, on what would have been her 60th birthday. Reporters note the brothers barely speak to each other off camera. For a few minutes, none of that matters. They came for her, not for each other. That single afternoon holds the entire moral question of this story inside it.
Was said in a day when there were a few more people around to make that seem like a justifiable comment.
The world changes a bit.
It changes a bit. I mean,
Diana earned this kind of permanent, physical memorial through actions the public never forgot. In 1987, she shook the hand of a man dying of AIDS without gloves on, at a time when many people wrongly believed the disease could spread through touch. That single gesture did more to challenge public fear than any government campaign of its era. Camilla, Queen, has never had a moment like that to point to, not because she lacks compassion, but because her path into public life started from the opposite direction, clawing back trust rather than being handed it. She has spent decades building patronages around domestic abuse survivors and osteoporosis research, real work quietly done that rarely earns a single headline. Where Diana's compassion played out in front of cameras built for maximum emotional impact, Camilla's has mostly played out in hospice corridors and support group meetings that no news crew bothered to film. So here is the question royal commentators keep circling without ever fully answering. Is keeping Diana's memory this vivid, decades later, an act of justice for a woman whose life ended too soon? Or has it become something closer to a permanent measuring stick that no living royal, including Camilla, could ever realistically stand next to and win? Whether this was ever about honoring Diana, or simply an institution unable to fully step past its own history, may depend entirely on which royal you ask, and which royal you were raised to love first. Every June, the cameras zoom in on exactly one detail outside Buckingham Palace: who is standing where on that balcony. Since 2023, the rule has been simple and public. Only working royals get a place in the frame during Trooping the Colour. Prince Andrew is not there. Prince Harry is not there. Royal watchers read that lineup like a scoreboard, because in this family, position in a photograph has always meant more than it should. But a photograph is not where real influence actually lives, and this story has been building toward that exact point from its very first scene. Power in this family was never only about titles, and it was never only about money either. If it were, Camilla, as queen, would hold every advantage without contest, and this entire conversation would already be settled. Real power here runs through something harder to photograph: trust earned over decades, emotional connection with the public, and whatever place a person ends up holding in the country's collective memory. Weighed against those three measures, the picture looks different than any balcony lineup could show. Anne, the Princess Royal, holds trust built through 50 years of engagements without a single scandal attached to her name. William, Prince of Wales, holds the future, an entire reign still ahead of him, shaped visibly by the mother he lost at 15. Camilla, Queen, holds the crown itself, the formal seat of the institution, earned the hard way, over 3 decades. And Diana, Princess of Wales, gone since 1997, still holds something none of the living royals can compete with directly. She holds the memory, and history keeps proving, generation after generation, that memory may be the single most durable form of power any monarchy has ever had to reckon with. On a small island in the middle of an ornamental lake at Althorpe House in Northamptonshire, Diana, Princess of Wales, has rested since September of 1997. Her family's private estate, not a palace, not a cathedral. Visitors are not allowed onto the island itself. They stand at the shore instead, looking across still water at a grave the public was never meant to reach, which may be exactly why so many still try. That distance says more than any headline this story has covered. The public was given her image, her causes, her sons. They were never given full access to her, and in death, that boundary became permanent. Maybe that is part of why her memory still moves through this family so freely, undimmed by the slow wear that living public figures cannot avoid. Everything traced across this story: William's instinct for people, Anne's instinct for duty, Camilla's long climb toward acceptance, Andrew's fall, Harry's departure, all of it points to the same conclusion. This was never a clean fight between heroes and villains. It was a family working out, in public and often against its own will, which parts of an old institution deserve to survive into a new century, and which parts have already quietly been left behind. The greatest battles of royalty, in the end, are rarely fought over crowns. They are fought over what the crown is actually supposed to mean, and who gets believed when they try to answer that question. If this kind of story means something to you, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. And if a particular part of this journey struck you, leave it in the comments below. Someone else scrolling past might need to read exactly what you have to say.